Hi everyone. My name is Andrew, and I've never been much of a writer, but I need to share what happened to me and my business partner, Charlotte, during a business trip in Texas. It was so strange and frightening that we can't stop thinking about it. I hope someone here can help us understand, because so far, we are completely without answers. If you've ever experienced something inexplicable, keep watching. You won't believe what we faced that night. It all started one night when we were returning from a business meeting with an important client. We decided to take a shortcut through the deserted roads of Texas to save time. It was late, and the only light came from our car's headlights. We were discussing the meeting when I noticed the fuel gauge was almost on empty. The road seemed endless, and there was no sign of a gas station. The tension grew, and Charlotte started nervously looking at the map and GPS, trying to find the nearest place to refuel. After a while, we spotted a small cabin by the side of the road. It looked old and poorly maintained, but it was our only option. Desperate and running out of options, we decided to stop and see if anyone could help us. The cabin was shrouded in an eerie silence, and as we approached, a chill ran down my spine. Little did we know, this decision would lead us into an unforgettable and terrifying experience. We stopped and knocked on the door. An old man opened it. He seemed quite strange, with a vacant look in his eyes and a smile that didn't inspire much confidence. He said his name was Samuel and that we could stay the night since the nearest gas station wouldn't open until morning, and we wouldn't make it there with the fuel we had. We entered the cabin, and as soon as we crossed the threshold, a sense of unease took over me. The interior was even more sinister than the exterior had suggested. The walls were covered with old objects, mementos from a long past time. There were black and white photos scattered everywhere, unfamiliar faces that seemed to watch us unsettlingly. Every corner of the room was decorated with bizarre relics, a grandfather clock that didn't work but seemed to mark a forgotten time, a wooden crucifix, weathered by age, and old children's toys that gave off a disturbing sense of abandonment. Samuel invited us to sit and began to speak, his hoarse voice filling the heavy silence of the cabin. These roads, he began, are known for their dark secrets. Many years ago, an entire family disappeared without a trace. They were traveling by car, just like you. The father, the mother, and 2 small children. No one ever found them, nor the car. They say the road swallowed them up, as if they never existed. Charlotte and I exchanged uneasy glances, the gravity of his words sinking in. The thought of staying there for the night was becoming increasingly uncomfortable, but we were left with little choice. Samuel's story hung in the air like a thick fog, making the room feel even colder and more oppressive. As the night wore on, strange noises echoed through the cabin. The wind howled outside, but it was the creaking of the old house and occasional distant whispers that unnerved us the most. Samuel had retired to another room, leaving us alone in the dimly lit main area, where the unsettling relics seemed to come alive in the flickering light of the fireplace. Neither Charlotte nor I could sleep. We sat in tense silence, jumping at every sound, our minds racing with thoughts of the family that had disappeared and the possibility that we might share their fate. The minutes dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity, until the first light of dawn finally began to filter through the cracks in the cabin's walls. Charlotte and I exchanged glances, already feeling the rising tension. Samuel continued, his eyes gleaming in the firelight. And then there's the story of the truck driver who lost control of his vehicle on a dark night, just like this one. He survived the crash, but he was never the same afterward. He said that while trying to escape the wreckage, he heard screams, cries of pain and despair coming from the darkness. He swore they were the spirits of people who died on these roads, trapped in an eternal limbo. The atmosphere was growing increasingly heavy. Samuel's voice was both hypnotic and disturbing. He then told us about a night when he himself heard something he could never forget. It was many years ago, he said, his voice almost a whisper. I was sitting right where you are, Andrew. It was a night like this, dark and silent. Suddenly, I heard a noise outside, something scratching at the door. When I opened it, there was nothing, just the dark night. But the screams started soon after. They were the screams of people begging for help, mixed with demonic laughter that seemed to come from all directions. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move until dawn. The vivid details of Samuel's story gave us chills. Every word seemed charged with truth and a terror we couldn't fully comprehend. The room seemed to close in around us, and the firelight cast grotesque shadows on the walls. Charlotte gripped my hand tightly, her eyes full of fear. We were trapped in that sinister narrative, unable to discern reality from fiction. With each story, the cabin felt more oppressive, as if the very walls absorbed and reflected the horror of each tale. As the night wore on, the oppressive silence of the cabin was occasionally punctuated by creaks and groans, the sounds of an old house settling. But in our heightened state, every noise seemed laden with menace. The weight of Samuel's stories, combined with our growing fear and fatigue, made the hours stretch interminably. Finally, the first light of dawn began to filter through the cracks in the cabin's walls, bringing with it a sense of tentative relief. When Samuel reappeared in the morning, he seemed almost like a different person, his eerie demeanor from the night before replaced with a benign, almost cheerful expression. He guided us to the nearest gas station and wished us well on our journey. As we drove away, we couldn't shake the feeling that we had narrowly escaped something far more sinister than just a night in an old cabin. The road ahead seemed brighter, the daylight dispelling the shadows of the previous night, but the memory of Samuel's stories lingered, a haunting reminder of the dark mysteries that still lurked in the depths of the Texas wilderness. In the end, Samuel looked at us with an enigmatic smile. "You think you're safe because you're together," he said softly, "but these roads make no distinctions. Be careful. Not everyone who passes through here is lucky enough to tell their stories." Those words echoed in my mind as we headed to the room he had prepared for us. We decided to try and get some sleep, though the idea of resting in that place was hard to accept. We lay down on the worn mattresses Samuel had offered, but the cabin's silence was disturbingly interrupted by incessant whispers. At first, I thought they were just a product of our imagination, but it soon became clear they weren't. The voices seemed to come from every corner of the cabin, murmuring indistinct words that enveloped us like a shroud of unease. Charlotte was visibly scared, her eyes wide open in the darkness as the whispers seemed to gain intensity. The sounds were suffocating, as if the cabin itself was whispering ancient and dark secrets. The murmurs blended together, creating a terrifying cacophony. "We need to get out of here," Charlotte whispered, her voice trembling. "Let's go to the car, at least we'll be safer there." I agreed immediately, feeling a growing urgency to escape that oppressive environment. We gathered our belongings quickly and quietly, careful not to make any noise that might attract attention. As we stepped outside, the night was still eerily dark, but the fresh air provided a small measure of relief from the suffocating atmosphere inside the cabin. We hurried to the car, our footsteps crunching on the gravel, sounding unnaturally loud in the stillness of the night. Once inside the car, we locked the doors and took a moment to catch our breath. The whispers seemed to fade away, replaced by the familiar hum of the engine as I turned the key. The sense of urgency was still there, propelling us to put as much distance as possible between us and that unsettling place. We drove in silence, the tension slowly easing as the cabin disappeared from sight. As dawn approached, the first rays of sunlight began to pierce the darkness, and we finally felt a semblance of safety. The events of the night seemed surreal, like a nightmare from which we had just woken up. But Samuel's stories and the eerie experiences we had in the cabin left a lasting impression, a reminder that some places are better left unexplored. Looking back, I still can't fully explain what happened that night. The whispers, the chilling stories, and Samuel's enigmatic smile, everything seemed too real to dismiss as mere imagination. If anything, that night taught us to trust our instincts and respect the unknown. The Texas roads may be long and winding, but they hold secrets that are best left undisturbed. We rose quietly and left the room, trying not to make any noise. As we opened the door, we were startled to find Samuel standing in the living room, just watching us. His eyes gleamed in the moonlight streaming through the window, and he wore that same strange smile that had greeted us. The way he looked at us, without saying a word, sent chills down my spine. It was as if he knew something we didn't, something profoundly disturbing. Without exchanging a word, we passed by him and went straight to the car. We locked ourselves inside, trying to fend off the fear. But even in the car, the feeling of being watched lingered. The fogged-up windows seemed like the only barriers between us and the darkness outside. Time passed slowly, and every noise from outside made us jump. The wind rustled the tree branches, creating dancing shadows that looked like sinister figures trying to approach. We tried to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time we closed our eyes, it felt like the whispers were getting closer. Charlotte held my hand tightly, and I could feel her trembling. The fear was palpable, and we were ready to leave at the first sign of dawn. Finally, when the first rays of sunlight began to appear on the horizon, we felt an immense sense of relief. It was as if the daylight had the power to dispel the horrors of the night. The sensation of relief upon seeing the daylight was indescribable, as if a great weight had been lifted off our shoulders. We thanked Samuel for his hospitality, though the word hospitality felt strange after the night we had endured. He just nodded, with that same enigmatic smile, and wished us good luck. His words, good luck, echoed oddly, almost like a premonition. We drove away quickly, the cabin and Samuel's unsettling presence fading into the background. The road ahead seemed brighter and more welcoming with each passing mile. As we distanced ourselves from that eerie place, Charlotte and I couldn't shake off the feeling that we had narrowly escaped something truly sinister. Looking back, the experience felt surreal, like a nightmare that refused to fade. Samuel's stories, the oppressive atmosphere of the cabin, and the inexplicable whispers had left a lasting impression on us. It served as a chilling reminder that some roads are best left untraveled, and some places hold secrets that are better left undiscovered. Without wasting any time, we started up the car and left that eerie cabin behind. The relief of being safe mixed with a chill down our spines, as we knew something deeply disturbing had happened that night, something we couldn't explain. We drove in silence to the next town, where we finally reached a gas station, and the feeling of relief was immediate. We parked the car and got out, still feeling the tension in our bodies. As the tank filled up, we struck up a conversation with the attendant, a middle-aged man with a friendly demeanor. We told him about the cabin where we had spent the night and about Samuel, the strange host. The attendant listened intently, but as we spoke, his expression shifted from curiosity to something darker. He shook his head slowly, as if he was hearing a story he already knew but still found disturbing. When we finished, he looked us in the eyes and said, in a grave voice, "Are you sure about where you were? Because there's no cabin in that area. I know these roads like the back of my hand, and I can guarantee there's no construction out there." Charlotte and I exchanged confused and worried glances. We insisted, describing the location and details of the cabin, but the attendant kept denying it. "These roads are treacherous," he finally said. "Many people report strange things around here, but a cabin like that? I've never heard of it. You're lucky to be safe." Those words didn't bring comfort. In fact, they only heightened our unease. If the cabin didn't exist, where had we spent the night? And who was Samuel? We returned to the car, still processing what the attendant had said. As we drove away from the gas station, we couldn't shake the feeling that our experience had been something beyond the ordinary. As we drove back to the safety of our everyday world, a sense of unreality hung over us. It was as if we had touched something deep and inexplicable, something that defied logic and understanding. Every mile we traveled away from the cabin seemed to distance us, but the memory of Samuel and the dark stories he told continued to haunt us, leaving us with a lingering question. What really happened that night on the dark roads of Texas? To this day, we can't explain what happened. I don't believe in ghosts or anything like that, but that night was too real to be a dream or hallucination. Has anyone else experienced something similar? Or does anyone have any idea what it could have been? Because this experience has left us completely without answers and, honestly, a little scared to drive those roads again. That was my story. I know it may sound crazy, but every detail is etched in my mind. Charlotte confirms everything, and I know we didn't imagine it. If anyone has any explanation or has experienced something like this, please share. We need answers.